second meeting of our WASH. This is the second meeting of today of our WASH in the supply chain working group, where we held a session this morning for our Asia Pacific, European, and African colleagues, and this is the session for the Americas. So welcome everyone, and we'll take you through the agenda in just a minute. Get to the agenda. Wonderful. For those that don't know me, I'm Cheryl Hicks, and I serve as a senior advisor to the CEO Water Mandate and the WASH4Work initiative. And really happy to be able to share with you some of the findings and work that's been going on in this working group. This is the final meeting of the 2022 calendar year for this working group. And so really looking to also get your feedback in this meeting on the way forward for this work and where WASH4Work can add the most value to your work on WASH access across your supply chains and value chains. So today we'll just review those objectives, share with you the results of the member consultation that's been going on since June, and some of the support tools that are already available through a pilot program that we've been running with Xylem this year. And then we'll hear from Una from Starbucks, who will share the Starbucks approach to WASH in the supply chain. And then we will, I know we've asked a few of you if you would also share your reflections on some of the areas that you believe WASH4Work can be most helpful in this journey. And then we wanted to also reflect on some particular opportunities for 2023, and happy to share also some of the thinking that came out of our call earlier today in the Asia Pacific time zone call to start to take that thinking forward and formulate the objectives and work plan for 2023 for this working group. Great. Well, let's get started, and don't be shy in raising your hands or using the chat function as we go through this. So many of you have been participating in the working group, and these objectives will be familiar to you. But really, what we set out to do this year was take stock of how companies' approaches to providing WASH access throughout your supply chains and value chains has evolved. The last piece of work that WASH4Work specifically engaged with partners on was in 2016, and lots happened since then. And so we wanted to understand the way forward now in 2022 to share learnings on different approaches and really to understand how WASH4Work can both help you with your strategies around the supply chain, but also your suppliers themselves, and to further develop a support program specifically for suppliers, which we've been piloting with Xylem's suppliers this year. And I believe Xylem is here to share some of our learnings from that pilot work. Next slide, please. So I think this is a synthesis of what we've heard around how current leading practice has evolved around supply chains and value chains and WASH, and also some of the common challenges that came up in some of the presentations and discussions of the working group, but also the one-on-one consultation calls that we've had with member companies as well. So in terms of leading practice, what has evolved is WASH access becoming a requirement for many companies in supplier codes of conduct and sometimes in contracting with suppliers as well. Also, many of you are providing incentives and support, particularly for your tier one suppliers. What seems to have evolved over the last few years is more focused work on behavior change and gender equity elements of WASH, prioritized also in the value chain, and and development of specific WASH policies and solutions for the agricultural and textile value chain contexts. So this is, again, a high level. We'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but also want to hear additional reflections from those on the call. Some of the common challenges around the value chain we heard were data, gaps in data, and in particular, data on the size of the gap. So big questions on, where is the sphere of influence here? Where is the sphere of responsibility? Where can we have the biggest impact, and how can we get closer to that data that we're looking for around how many people in the value chain are at risk from lack of access to WASH. So that's something that we also had some suggestions about throughout the consultation, and we'll get to some of that potential work that we might be able to support with as WASH4Work. Another area was on standardized reporting, and many companies have not yet made it a requirement for their suppliers to report back on the different actions and impacts that they're having on WASH. Also, we want to link to some of the other work going on in WASH4Work around standardized reporting that may also be potential tools. We've also heard from many companies that there's increasing expectations on sustainability reporting through the different reporting and disclosure mechanisms such as DJSI, GRI, CDP, AWS was on the call this morning, Ceres, who are asking more detailed questions around the risk exposure linked to WASH in the supply chain. And finally, the evolving climate and health risks disrupting WASH service resilience, also impacting the value chain. So I'll pause here. It's a very high level synthesis, but hopefully this captures some of the inputs that you've given. If there are other sort of ideas here around leading practice and other challenges that we could look at together, please feel free to pop those in the chat or raise your hand. Just do a quick pause for any comments or questions here. Okay. I'll continue to move forward with a few of the ideas now, that came out of the consultation on areas where WASH4Work could support. But first, just 2 slides here on the key risks identified for companies in terms of WASH in the supply chain. Worker health and safety still at the top of the list, related to human rights as a basic requirement, but also the security of business critical raw materials, especially in agricultural supply chains. The direct links to women were also made by many companies, particularly in agricultural and textile supply chains, where women are the dominant in the workforce. Climate change, we mentioned before, but also the pricing of WASH risk. CDP released some figures earlier this year, citing about 6 billion in risk calculated due to WASH, including the supply chain. So some of the supply chain risks leading to the business case for action. Next slide, please. And on the opportunity side, also some new work coming out from the partners of WASH4Work, having a lot more detail in terms of the financial ROI of investing in WASH, a lot more evidence there, productivity gains, avoided health costs, and contributions to shareholder value, potential for additional value creation, and on building people's resilience and climate and water resilience strategies, also WASH being key to ensuring people's resilience and community resilience. And there's another point here which we'll talk about a little bit more, but really the opportunity here for the sheer potential impact of WASH access throughout supply chains and value chains, contributing to the cited 4x acceleration of WASH access services needed to meet the 2030 goals. So, a huge opportunity here for scale and acceleration of the global goals on access to WASH through the supply chain and the value chain. So just a few elements of the business case for action. We did hear from our pilot program, that many companies perhaps new to WASH, where they're a supply chain partner and new to WASH, really also needing to revisit the business case here. Next slide, please. So this is something that we wanted to put on the table here and get your reflections on. These are figures from the WHO and UNICEF, who make up the joint monitoring program on WASH for the SDG 6 goals. As you can see here, and from that 2020 report that many of us remember, WASH still lagging behind in numbers and requiring a 4x acceleration, as I said before, but also the opportunity this presents for impact through the value chain. And in getting to the data, we thought it was really interesting that there could be opportunities through WASH4Work because WASH expert partners are part of the membership, and we have started to have these conversations with them as well to be able to harness more of that data, whether it be at a country level or regional level, to understand more about the size of the need and the overlap with different value chains and operations. Next slide, please. So this is an example, some maps that you may have seen before, and we have these for water access, sanitation access, and hygiene access, even for menstrual hygiene services. And what this report highlights from the JMP is that we still don't have sufficient data. So risks in terms of water access or proportions of the population with safely managed water access have the most data by country, but as you can see, there's a lot of gray here, a lot of countries and regions without sufficient data. If we go to sanitation, it's even less, while the countries in need, if we could go to the next slide, Juliana. While the size of the need seems to have more data around it, again, still some key countries, part of value chains where we don't have that global data benchmark. And next slide, please. Hygiene has the least amount of data, although Africa and Southeast Asia seem to have the most here. And I think on the good news side, there has been an effort to start to capture data on menstrual health as well in the next slide. So one of the ideas here was if we could, work with the JMP and our WASH expert partners to to understand what those numbers are and how they've been calculated at the country level where we have data. So focusing in on the countries, first of all, where we have data to overlay with, where key supply chains at risk from WASH are, and be able to look at, how we can measure progress really against that goal in the region in the supply chain. What came up this morning in the call was really the opportunity also through WASH4Work and the network in supply chain that may have suppliers in common to help to link that up. So this was something that was raised sort of early in our discussions in July, and that we've tried to take forward by collaborating with the JMP and our WASH expert partners, but something that we could take forward to really help define the size of that need and the actions or the collective ambition, if you will, of where business is committing to WASH in the supply chain. Next slide, please. Again, stop me if you have any comments on that piece. Just another quick linkage to some of the support tools that have been developed around WASH in the value chain. First of all, the Water Action Hub is a tool where many of you have already indicated some of the projects that you're working on in the value chain. Next slide, please. And many of you, as mandate members, are familiar with the Water Action Hub, but an opportunity also to understand the impact that that your organizations are having, and we as a collective business effort are having in addressing the global goals. Next slide, please. And the next is reference to the pilot program that we've been running with Xylem and their suppliers who have signed the WASH pledge and how to provide specific guidance on WASH implementation for suppliers using the WASH pledge guiding principles. We've also looked into other tools that are available that address some of the specific issues that we've heard from supply chain partners. So these are tools that we can make available and build into a support program also for suppliers, which we see as a huge opportunity to accelerate that implementation. Next slide, please. Also a link to some of the other work going on in WASH4Work to working together with partners to develop a standardized accounting and reporting method for the co-benefits of WASH, going beyond beneficiary accounting to really understand the impacts of WASH interventions on the people that they are meant to serve. And this work, as many of you know, is underway, and we should have a first method available for the UN Water Conference in March. This is also a potential tool for suppliers and supply chain partners in order to start to have some more consistent data across operations, supply chains, and communities across companies. And this point came up this morning, especially where there are suppliers in common, so that we're not creating a reporting fatigue here if there's common and standardized, consistent reporting. Next slide, please. The other linkage that came up quite a bit in the consultation was the link, of course, to climate impacts, especially where particular WASH supply chain risks are. And as many of you know, and many of you on the call have been part of this development to develop a business framework on climate resilient WASH together with our WASH expert stakeholders, which we just launched 2 weeks ago at the COP27 Egypt meetings. Another tool, to build into that support for supplier partners. And I think that's it for me. Yes. So we hope that this was helpful just to get a flavor of some of the findings of our consultation on approaches in the supply chains and some of the ideas that have come up so far on where WASH4Work as a platform can support further development to mobilize WASH actions through value chains. But we wanted to also get the opportunity to share learnings from different companies. And so really happy to have Una from Starbucks here to share Starbucks' approach to WASH in the value chain.
Great, thank you so much, Cheryl. What a wonderful introduction. And Juliana, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen from my end. Wonderful. Okay, let me just get connected real quick. Share screen. Just a moment. All righty, are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
we can see it.
Perfectly.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. My name is Una Herniak. I lead sustainability strategy at Starbucks, which includes a focus on the key material issues for the company across our environmental impact. And that includes water as well as climate and waste. Before we dove right into WASH, I wanted just to take a quick moment to ground us in terms of how WASH fits into the bigger picture of what Starbucks is doing and what's part of our climate and our water work. So we've really been on a journey, I would say, the last 2 years or so to rethink our entire water stewardship approach, to make it much more holistic, to make it grounded in science and data, and to really be striving for more collective action and impact. And with that, we in 2020 had set an initial target for Starbucks to really focus on our coffee supply chain, which makes a lot of sense given that coffee is core to our business. But it was very, very focused on an efficiency perspective. And we worked really hard to actually demonstrate the need for why Starbucks should focus across our entire agricultural supply chain, which is where so many of the climate and the water impacts happen for the company, and that we should look at things through the lens of equity and the impacts that the water and climate crisis has on communities around the world, and to look at what watershed health means in a different way, depending on the local and contextualized context. And so we were able to land on this updated target that's featured here for 2030, and highlight some of our core commitments in terms of how we're going to achieve this goal. And as you can see from this slide, we previously did not have WASH integrated as a corporate commitment within our strategy. Starbucks has had a long-standing history of working in WASH, but it's traditionally been focused on complementary efforts from the Starbucks Foundation. And so what we're going to do today is show you a little bit about how we're starting to work in the supply chain on WASH, but how we're also complementing some of those efforts, leveraging the foundation. And when it comes to determining, where is it that Starbucks is going to work and have a deeper level of commitment, I wanted just to briefly show you the slide here that highlights some of the top high-risk basins that impact Starbucks' supply chain, as well as our stores around the world and communities that we touch. And when we did this exercise, we partnered with WWF to leverage their risk assessment tool, which includes WASH indicators, for us to be able to showcase, where is it that we understand that there are major concerns around water quality, where is it there are concerns in terms of WASH infrastructure or governance, and we were able to come up with a list that's now guiding where we believe that Starbucks should be investing additional resources into our own kind of investments and grants, but then also in terms of partnership with others. And a lot of that we are proudly achieving, of course, with many of you that are either on the line or joining us later through the recording, working with you through the UN CEO Water Mandate, WASH4Work, and the UN Water Resilience Coalition. But we're really starting to bring some of these projects to life beyond, what was traditionally in that foundation type of approach. And I'm going to feature a couple of these examples today, but I wanted to first start with, where did WASH get integrated in the beginning? And really, it's through cafe practices, which is Starbucks' social and environmental program within the coffee supply chain that we've developed with Conservation International and have deployed across thousands of farms all around the world that are helping farmers really advance the practices on farm, but also to protect workers and ensure that they have the type of environment on farm and within their communities to be able to thrive. And one of those major aspects of it is to really evaluate, for example, what is the opportunity for women that are working on coffee farms to ensure that they're not walking several miles to collect water, whether that's for them to take home or to leverage for drinking purposes when they're on farm, as well as in terms of providing adequate sanitation services. And so one of the challenges that you may or not be familiar with in terms of the coffee supply chain and landscape is that the locations can be quite remote and very challenging for potentially some of the more traditional type of solutions and interventions to work in these areas. And so as we've been able to collect data and information through the cafe assessments and inputs from farmers, we've been able to really start identifying in certain areas where, really the terrain might be so rough and unique that we need to think about totally different types of solutions. And innovation has been really key for us in terms of thinking about the way that we could be able to tackle those. So I wanted to take an opportunity to highlight one example of what that looks like and take you to a coffee farm in East Timor, where you can see how we've been able to address some of the WASH issues in close partnership with Zero Mass Water, also known as Source. So I'm going to try to see if I can get us over to view this video. Hopefully it works. Let's see. Can't tell if you guys can see it, so I'm just gonna.
You may need to stop sharing and then share the video itself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All righty, let's see if this is going to work. Fingers crossed. All right, let's travel to East Timor together.
Mudança boa tá na Soromaga bene. Bene agora fim mai é a minha bairro de do home. Isa itanole sa yung islikos. Yung restaurant
Presidente da cooperativa Café Timor. E reúne a serviço, né, orientação para funcionários ser outro até o serviço quando vai café e a Timor-Leste. Te biasa mesmo que moras ka di area, né?
samila precisa para tu ba kurtan be matan lori ba nona fali mo si hunting pus de ba ai maklayang mo sam si babukai e mudito em sinta serviços kamano yamen
अगर स्टेबस बाबे ने अजुरे से स्टारबक्स माइबे इहा अगर स्टेबस बा आमी बेल हेतम पाने दी जाने बेल फॉरेंसिक बेमोस बा मेरा सिपा कम्युनिटी जारी तमल ने हम से लालवा
Great. Well, I hope you were all inspired by that video and the way that we can leverage innovative solutions as well to tackle some of the WASH issues that we face, even in the most remote places around the world. And just to complement the work of what Starbucks Corporate is doing, I wanted to just highlight really briefly, because many of you might be familiar with Starbucks's foundation work in terms of how we engage consumers too. So we do have a product offering that we sell at Starbucks stores called Ethos Water. A portion of those sales all go directly to funding WASH work that's supported by Starbucks Foundation. And this is targeted in some of those high-risk basins around the world, which includes our efforts in Côte d'Ivoire, where we know that there are a lot of challenges from a WASH perspective as well. So I wanted just to very quickly also highlight this wonderful example of our partnership with Cargill, which is one of the largest suppliers around the world for cocoa, and a dear partner of ours through the UN CEO Water mandate, working closely with CARE, where we are really putting that emphasis on women's advancement to come together and to truly advocate for what their needs are. So many of you, I think, are familiar with the approach of village savings loans associations as a way for us to bring women together, provide opportunities to provide education and training around financial literacy, civic responsibility and opportunities, but as well as WASH education, and allowing women to leverage this type of a platform to really pool their money together and evaluate in terms of what is it that they need the most. And many of the types of improvements and needs and investments that we're seeing that they'd like to fund, which are really them advocating for what is it that they need, are focused around WASH. So we leverage the work that CARE is doing to facilitate this, to ensure that women have the opportunity to be able to pay and access what it is that they need. And so clean water access, similar to the video that you saw in East Timor, as well as being able to provide for toilets at their home, are solutions that they continue to advocate for and are willing to take that financial ask of themselves and their communities to be able to provide for those pieces. So to close out, I just wanted to show you this beautiful video of our last visit, and inspire us all for continuing the work that this group is doing. So I'll stop there and see if you guys have any questions, or see how Cheryl wants to take it from here. Thanks for letting us share.
Fantastic. Thank you, Una. I think, you've highlighted the role of innovation and also financing tools, which are also, a couple of those challenges, common challenges that came up in terms of the contexts, of your supplier partners and the communities where workers live. So thank you for sharing that perspective. And just curious, I'm wondering if you could highlight two things, where you're sort of applying innovations. I think there's always this question of scale and how you're sort of planning for those rollouts. And the second thing that came up this morning as well was around reporting and the juxtaposition that we want more data, but we're also not yet requiring supplier partners to report back on some of their impacts or interventions, innovations for solving for some difficult water challenges. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that from Starbucks' perspective.
Sure. I think from an innovation perspective, I would definitely say a good portion of some of these investments are still very much in pilot mode and are there for us to really evaluate the ability of these solutions, particularly from a cost perspective. Even the great work we've been doing with Source, we're still looking at ways that we can reduce the cost and think about either in the future state ways that maybe local governments, municipalities can come and help with financing some of the hydro solar panels. So that's something that's really critical, I think, in terms of no matter wherever our interventions are, is really starting to think about that long-term sustainability piece and that local government engagement for funding as well as ongoing maintenance. So that's, I think, the part around innovation that I would say is really critical for us to keep thinking about. And it's truly a country by country and local community by community piece that we're evaluating. And when it comes to the data component, we do leverage aspects of it from cafe practices where we get some of that information. I would say the biggest things that we're seeing in terms of just the evolution around data is how much more of it is getting digitized in terms of, like, even actually this village savings group that I was featuring from Côte d'Ivoire, they are actually using, cell phones to engage in terms of what is it that they want to vote on, how are they tracking in terms of how they're leveraging the loans that they're taking out and the impact that they're having. So I do think that, we're trending in that direction where we're really starting to see the data access be spread more to the actual beneficiaries, quote unquote, in terms of farmers themselves, women in the communities, et cetera. And I'm excited to see how that unfolds, but also leveraging the supplier data component as much as we can. So that engagement that happens when an auditor potentially comes on farm, integrating that into the overall system is something that Starbucks is working on. And then last but not least, I think it comes down to the partners that we have, right? So some of the examples are, relationships with CARE and Water.org and WaterAid, and we're constantly having conversations with them too about how we're advancing, data access, governance, tracking capabilities to make sure that those are feeding into reporting for our corporate target, which includes a volumetric target, but also an access target of reaching 5 million people. And I would say across the board, those organizations have definitely been able to develop their, data maturity in terms of being able to provide to us, what we need that then organizations like Limnotech can validate for us to feel confident in terms of reporting against those types of corporate targets. So hope that helps.
Great, thank you. And one of the suggestions that's come up as well, where WASH4Work, might be helpful is to help create a solutions database, for some of these WASH solutions, some of the newer innovations that are being piloted that may be interesting for other companies and their partners. So definitely we'll tap into Source for that. So thank you for sharing that. So now we'll go to our discussion, and Una, also would love your reflections on some of these questions and really trying to get into some of the detail on where WASH4Work can support these programs and how you're evolving, what some of the challenges have been that might be common challenges across companies, across your supplier partners, where we can also develop into our support program for suppliers specific guidance addressing specific issues. And so I wanted to invite, first of all, Andrea and Donna from from Xylem, who we've been piloting this specific guidance for implementation of the WASH pledge requirement that you've set with your suppliers this year, to share some of your perspectives along these lines, and some of the ideas that you have for how we might add value going forward.
Hey Cheryl, thanks. I can get started. Sorry I'm not joining on video, but I'm still at a conference here. So first of all, amazing to hear, the approach from Starbucks. I think we commented on this also this morning, the fact that we have such different supply chains across, the various WASH4Work members, and it's great to hear other approaches. It gives us ideas as well. For example, we haven't necessarily focused on the women aspect or so much the equity aspect when we talk about WASH in our supply chain, but we did go for a broader approach saying, we want WASH for all. So we are not willing to work with suppliers who are not themselves willing to take a formal commitment saying that they will check that they're providing safe WASH to all their employees within their facilities, that they will address WASH within their own value chains and communities, no matter what the supplier is doing, no matter if they are a service provider, logistics provider, or a manufacturing company. So that's the approach we've been taking. We've been piloting this one with yourselves and WBCSD before that. It's gone well so far. We keep on learning, the support that the various companies of different sizes and different industries may require, but we learned that the main challenge there is making it matter and making it a priority for everyone, and therefore our ambition is really to make sure that we are providing a safe space and a good support, or good enough support, for making it easy for these suppliers to join us in our efforts and expand our impact. So this morning we spoke more about leveraging our own corporate social responsibility program and partners to have our suppliers also work on WASH projects. We talked about how we would love to see more of the Water Action Hub being used, and just this network ready to come together and say, okay, even if we have different supply chains, what is it that we can work on together, because perhaps we are in the same region or affecting the same watersheds. So that's what we would love to see next year. Donna, do you have anything to add?
Yes, yeah, it's going on. Yes, hello everybody. Yes, I'd like to add to that. I really love what you're saying, because I think one thing we can do for our suppliers, because you your video showed it so eloquently, how clean water and sanitation can actually not have women and children going to fetch water a couple hours a day, etc. And we do the same thing when we build water towers in our communities. So when we talk to our suppliers and they say, why should we go out to the community? I think they could see the bigger impact. It's education, it's health, it's just not water. And so I think educating why you would do it, and then, when they're starting to talk, and getting better in their sustainability journey, they'll be able to be better to talk about SDG 6 and what impact they're having. They're not just saying they're doing WASH, they're educating women or providing income from women. So I think that's a very valuable thing. I also really like the sharing of different technologies. I think that's very interesting. Again, we're big in water towers and some stuff in agriculture, but I love that source equipment. I think that's fascinating. And then also to Andrea's point, we're looking to partner with folks in wash basins or water basins, water basins, and finding the right partners for that. A lot of times we reach out to our suppliers and they're a lot smaller, they're SMEs, but partnering with larger companies who are in WASH, Xylem and Starbucks. So yeah, I think if there was a forum where we could do that, finding out where our commonalities are, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Andrea and Donna. next, I'd like to call on Francisco from Gap Inc. to share some reflections and on the questions or on your approach to WASH in the supply chain. I'll leave it up to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yes, no, I think a lot of what Una and Andrea have mentioned are part of our challenges and the things that you have seen through our Women in Water Alliance work that are needed. I think focusing maybe a little bit on the sustainability and the long-term value of the interventions. I think the other challenge is to align any activity with some local or national government priorities. That usually helps accelerate the process and also helps ensure sustainability of whatever it is done. So I think that's a challenge. It takes a lot of time. And again, it's something that through collective action is the only way to scale this. So the other challenge, I believe, is also to properly overlap kind of the geographies where we operate with existing initiatives or where other companies' initiatives so that we can build that. So to what Don, I think, and Andrea were referring to, it would be very useful to know where people have an impact or have a presence, and that will help us join together and work forward with that. I think there's many ways that, there could be a lot of collaboration and help from WASH4Work. I think creating those relationships, we need a lot of trust between multiple organizations. So having a platform where we can build those relationships is very valuable. And also trying to transform those separate activities that everybody's doing into something that could be aggregated will be very good. But I think in the end, the ambition for WASH at the end is just to build a shared vision, because I think we all have different priorities at the business level. Our suppliers have different priorities as well. And so create that shared vision is very important. And also we need to build those robust management and financial structures. I think one experience from the Women in Water Alliance was that the organization was not ready. We didn't have the policies, procedures, or trackings for responding or reporting to USAID, which was our partner in the funding part. So understanding what is required from reporting, not only to the CDP or Dow Jones Sustainability, but also within partners in funding will be very important. And that's a steep learning curve. So if somebody has gone through it and can share it and share that knowledge, I think it will be very, very useful to be able to, again, accelerate action on it. Those things comes to mind. I think, again, we share everything that Una has said, I think, as well on those challenges and opportunities. And just scaling something from a pilot like what you're doing with Source, I think is super interesting. But then how do you scale it? How do you do more than, a village with 50 or 100 people? That is the challenge. And that's where we need that collective action and funding mechanisms, I believe, to increase that impact.
Thank you, Francisco. And of course, Gap Inc. also shared your approach to the Women in Water Alliance approach in India in an earlier working group meeting. And so we thank you for that. And all of the companies that have shared their approaches during this process we're also working with to share some of those approaches and share knowledge in an insights paper that we look to publish in January. So as a first step, to your point, Francisco, of really having the knowledge of the different approaches, different solutions, that'll be our first step to collate what we've learned so far this year and continue that learning going forward. But I think echoing some of the comments, maybe we can just have the last slide in the last couple of minutes here, our attempt to bring together some of the opportunities for 2023 to maybe address some of these ideas and put them into action. Juliana, can we have the final slide on some of those opportunities? So Yes, mapping the collective size of the gap. So this is come up, this need for better data. How can we work with the partners of WASH4Work, corporate partners in terms of overlaps, but also our WASH expert NGO partners that have a lot of data on the size of the need, to match both of those, both size of the need and in terms of access, but also the size of the need in terms of material risks for companies. And I think that's something that's really doable. So we've started that journey and have been engaging with some of our WASH expert partners to start with that, what's available at different country levels. And the next step then will be a deeper dive with each of you to start to overlay some of those priority geographies where you've prioritized WASH actions in your supply chains, to see where the matches are. So that's something that we will continue and hopefully we'll have some early results in early next year. And then once we have that map, to then I love what you said too, Francisco, about a collective vision. I think that's a better language than collective vision is ambition. I think a vision that will then fit the different strategies, but to have that collective vision to really demonstrate how business is really moving the needle, towards the bigger global goals and size of that need in these specific geographies where we've all prioritized. So that is an ambition, I guess, that we would like to put out there for 2023, to come up with that ambition, or I think again, vision is a better word for it. And then in terms of connecting members for collective supplier actions, we mentioned the Water Action Hub, and I know that was reiterated also by Xylem. So I know many of you are using that tool already. So to be able to work together, and Leo is on the call here, who is our manager from the mandate and WASH4Work, helping us to do that. So that's another area that we could take action on. And I think, making a conscious effort to start linking up these different initiatives, as was mentioned, around the standardized accounting and reporting on co-benefits beyond beneficiary accounting, and also on practices for climate resilient WASH. And I think this is really where the innovation comes in as well, because what we're seeing is we do need new solutions for climate resilience, and so opportunities to really share our learnings in terms of the innovations that we believe will lead to more climate and water resilience. So these are some of the opportunities that we've tried to collate and start to think about how we can take action on them. Would love any further input that you have. Please send it along. We're planning a next full partner meeting to share the plans for 2023 in January. And so we'll take your comments on board and your input on board in order to shape this work for 2023. But just really thank you all. Really huge opportunity for impact in the value chains and supply chains. So we're really excited about this work, and we really think we can have an impact here. So looking forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Thanks all so much.
Thank you, and thank you to Una for your presentation today, and to Xylem for your presentation in the morning, and to all of the input and suggestions that you guys have made. Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good week.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.